We're learning the fourth Siche on Parshas Vaeira in Chelek Tezayin on page 79. A Siche on the beginning of Makas Tzvardeya. Vatala Tzvardeya. The Shir today is being learned to the Nishmas, Rabbi Yosef ben Yamim ben Rabbi Menashe Koltman. From Pasik Vayet Aaron es Yadi Goyme Vatala Tzvardeya Vatachas Eretz Mitzrayim. So the pasuk in this week's parsha where it says that Aaron HaKohen placed his hands on the rivers of Mitzrayim, and Vatala Tzvardeya, the Tzvardeya came up from the river, Vatachas Eretz Mitzrayim, and it covered Eretz Mitzrayim. Is Rashi maitik diverte Vatala Tzvardeya. So Rashi brings the two words Vatala Tzvardeya from the pasuk. One is Mefarish, and he explains Tzvardeya Achasaisa. It says a singular term, Tzvardeya. So there was just one Tzvardeya. V'hoyu Makenoisa. And the Mitzrayim were hitting this one Tzvardeya. And what happened? And it streamed forth swarms and swarms of frogs. That's the first pshat that Rashi quotes. There's a second pshat in Rashi, as the Rabbi indicates, v'chulu, which will be quoted soon in Siv Beis. But first to explain, what's Rashi coming to clarify here? In Pashtos, so this simply is the Rashi Eisen zu bavaranen. Rashi is here to clarify favos ashteto vatal hatzvardeya. Why does the pasuk say hatzvardeya loshin yachid, a singular term? B'shas says given a ribit tzvardim, when the whole makkah was the fact that the entire land Mitzrayim was filled with tzvardim, as the pasuk says right afterwards vatachas Eretz Mitzrayim, that it filled the whole Eretz Mitzrayim. The far is Rashi mefarish. So therefore Rashi explains. As lachatchila is taka given b'lo zayin tzvardeya. In the beginning, when the makkah began, there was just one tzvardeya. Nor durch dem was hayem makkah noisa. Then the Mitzrayim were hitting it. Hat sie von sich allein herausgegeben the chilim. So it, on its own, swarms and swarms of tzvardim, of frogs, came out of this one tzvardeya. That's simply what Rashi is coming to clarify. Okay, as we'll see in the continuation of the Siche, the Rebbe will point out that there's really something else that Rashi is coming to explain in these two words of Vital HaTzvardeya itself, not only because of the continuation of the pasuk, but the Chasas Eretz Mitzrayim, the Hakad one Tzvardeya cover the entire Eretz Mitzrayim, because Rashi in the Dibur HaMaschel stops on these two words Vital HaTzvardeya and doesn't indicate that he's coming to explain how could that fit with the continuation, what the Chasas Eretz Mitzrayim. Okay, now, what's the source of this? This question to explain what Hatzvardeya Loshin Yochid means is already brought in the Gemara and in Medrash. Euch die Gemara in Shmeis Rabbe stellt sich auf dem, was steht, Vatal Hatzvardeya Loshin Yochid. In the Gemara and in Medrash, they stop on this point. Why does it say Tzvardeya with the singular term? Bringt auf zwei days, and there are two opinions in the Gemara. Rabbi Kiva says Tzvardeya Achas Saisa, that there was just only one Tzvardeya, similar to what Rashi says. But Rabbi Kiva says different. V'hi hishritza u'mala kol eretz Mitzrayim. As is indicated there in the Gemara before, that what Rabbi Kiva is saying is that this one Tzvardeya gave birth in a supernatural way to all these many masses of Tzvardim, and they covered the entire Eretz Mitzrayim. So not that it streamed forth by the Mitzrayim hitting it, but it just gave birth in this supernatural way. Another opinion of the Gemara, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah disagrees with Rabbi Kiva, and he says, Tzvardeya achasaisa, like the pasuk says, there was one Tzvardeya in the beginning, but then what happened was, Sharka lahem, this one Tzvardeya whistled, and Vehem bo, and all the other masses of Tzvardim of the entire world came to Mitzrayim. That's the second pshat. So Rashi's pshat is not any of these pshatim, not Rabbi Kiva and not Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rashi is saying a pshat which fits with a different medrash. Darfim verstehen. So the question is, why does Rashi choose his pshat? And the Rebbe gives the following introduction. Pirish Rashi is doch ki yidua, so it's known that everything Rashi says is miyusad lefi pshuta shel mikra, is all based on the simple pshat of the pasuk. Hashem does not perform any miracles for no purpose. This is a concept which is also fitting to the simple interpretation of the psukim, that you interpret a pshat and a pasuk with this rule that we're not going to put a miracle into the pasuk if it's a miracle for no purpose. So if so, it would logically follow to say as well, as oich bayanes was hot parsit, even if the pasuk is talking about a miracle that did occur, is a vifel mekenzagen mefarajain, as der nes hat an anhalt and darki ateva, sorry. So as much as it's possible to explain that the miracle that the pasuk is speaking about still has some connection to the way this miracle developed, is somehow connected to some degree to natural means, there's no reason to explain and accept as is an anayfen was the nes brech legamri the chukei hateva, that the miracle that the Torah speaks about is completely breaking the laws of nature. Val de hasafa is dach lamagana, because to interpret the pasuk dafke in such a way that it has no development with any natural means whatsoever is there's no reason for this extent of a nes to occur. If it could be explained that the nes that happened has some connection to teva. So now coming back over here to explaining Vatal HaTzvardeya, how this Makkah of Tzvardeya began. Hein Favos bringt Rashi den Pirish from Medrash. Why does Rashi specifically bring this pshat from the Medrash as Hayu Makkah Noisa V'Matezes Nechilim, that the Mitzrim hit the Tzvardeya, the one Tzvardeya, and swarms streamed out of it. Vasazan Nes, such a type of miracle, as Durach HaKah, Zoln von Irareis kommen Naye, Bashafen and Nechilim, just by hitting it, miraculously, new swarms of Tzvardim come out of it, Hot Legamrin it Kanon Alten Darki HaTeva, has absolutely no connection. There's no development that's related to any means of nature. Be'ez, hat gekent mefarish sein, while Rashi has the option to explain what the pasuk is saying here, Led Gemara und Shmeis Rabbe, according to what's brought in the Gemara and in the Medrash, Vidas Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, either like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's opinion, as the Tzvardeya Sharkalem Veimbo, that there was one Tzvardeya that whistled and all Tzvardim in the world heard, Virashi Taicha Sabdart, and Rashi explains what this means, as Shomu Koila Kol Tzvardim Shabaylam Veimbo, that all the Tzvardim, all the frogs in the world heard the voice of the whistling of this one Tzvardeya and came to Mitzrayim. Was therein is not given the nes muflo from a bria chadasha. Even if this itself, that all tzvardim in the world hear the whistling of one frog in Mitzrayim, but it's nevertheless not such a wondrous miracle like saying that there was new creation of swarms of frogs that just miraculously are created out of this one frog. So that Rashi, that's one option to bring Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Or at least Rashi could bring, like the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, as Hishritza Umala Kol Eretz Mitzrayim, that this one Tzvardeya gave birth to many masses of frogs that covered the whole Eretz Mitzrayim. Yes, this itself, of course, is a creation and a birth of so many frogs is a miracle. Is es aber fort gewen gebunden mit der Geder von Teva Hailade, Hishritza. But nevertheless, this is not a kind of miracle that is not connected to means of nature at all. It's related to the nature of giving birth. Virashi Taich, Mimeyeh, Yotzav Lodes, that from the innards of the frog, it gave birth. Yeah, the number, the quantity of these frogs that covered all that of Tzrayim is unusual, but it's giving birth to other Tzfardim. So instead, Rashi chooses the pshat that it says in the Medrash, which is the most supernatural, not related to nature at all, that it just swarmed out of it by the Mitzrim hitting it. Why is Rashi choosing dafka this pshat? Okay, so this is the Medrash that Rashi brings in the beginning. Now, Tanoch is Rashi mamshech. Then Rashi continues and says, Zeu medrashay. This is the Medrash in this pasuk. But now the simple pshat that we could say, what this pasuk is saying, is as follows: Shirutz hatzfardim koire loshin yechidus. That the swarming of frogs, that's referred to in the pasuk with a singular term. So when you read hatzvardeya, it doesn't mean the frog, which is one existence of a frog, but the swarming of frogs. That's sort of one occurrence that happens, and therefore that could also be referred to in a singular term. And Rashi brings a proof for this. So similar later, by the Makkah of Kinim, the lice, the pasuk over there also says Vatihi hakinom. So it uses the term kinom, which is a singular term. Now what does that mean? It means harechisha, the creeping mass of lice. That's the taich of the singular term of kinim. So it's not referring to one lice, but it's rather referring to the creeping mass of lice, the creeping of the lice. And Rashi brings the French, the laws for this. Okay, kedei der ben chomish lemikra soll es klarer verstehen. So that the child learning this should understand what Rashi is saying. Fartaiches Rashi euch belaz. He translates this also in French, which is gdulira belaz, referring to the creeping of the lice. So that's what it means over there. Va'af vatal hatzvardeya. So too we could say over here, when the pasuk says vatal hatzvardeya, the singular term, it doesn't refer to one svardeya that came up, but it means grinu lira belaz, which means the swarming of frogs. Swarming of frogs is in a singular term. Okay, so the Rebbe actually will focus, it's pretty unusual, but the Rebbe will explain what exactly Rashi is doing by bringing this laz, the old French words for kinam and hatzvardeya in this context, in this Rashi. We'll see. Okay, but this is the simple pshat of the pasuk. It did swarm, many frogs came out right at the beginning of the Makkah. Why does it say a singular term? Because when it says shiritz hatzvardim, it means the swarming of frogs, that's said in a singular term. Darfen verstehen. So the question here is, Rashi is always coming to explain the simple pshat of the pasuk. Und nur dann, wenn the pshat HaKosov is nit glatik, only when the simple pshat of the pasuk is not smoothly understood, bringt Rashi in Agoda meshev es divrei mikra. So he brings a medrash that will settle the words, that will explain what the pasuk is saying. So the question here is, wie kommt es? Was da is Rashi magdim dem pirish was allein schreibt, das is his medrash. Rashi here brings first the pshat that there was one svardeya and the mitzvim hit it, and he clearly himself says that this is the medrash. Far dem pirish was wie Rashi schreibt pshutai. Before he brings the simple pshat that it meant the swarming of frogs, and that's also in a singular. That's the question. Oich is not move on, but now there's another question here as well regarding this. Okay, let's see how the Rebbe goes through this here. Now, Bishloime, it will be well understood this. Das was Rashi darf ankommen so araye as hatzvardeya mein shiritz hatzvardim. The fact that Rashi has to bring a proof from the Makkah of Kinim that hatzvardeya, even though it's singular, could be referring to that one swarming of frogs. Und the fact steht es belashon yichilis, and therefore it uses a singular term here. It's moving with pashtus, so it's understood why Rashi has to prove this. Why? Es ist schwer zu sagen, as der Nomen Svardeya. It's very difficult to say that the name Svardeya itself, which means a frog, soll meinen die Sach von Shiris Hatzvardim. That it's referring to the swarming of the frogs. Was steht nicht in Pasuk? It's not written in the Pasuk, the Shiris, the swarming, it doesn't say in the Pasuk, it just says Hatzvardeya. And more importantly, and this is the main thing that Rabbi will focus on, und is a Begriff, was legt sich auf allerlei Schrotzim und nicht aufgehäufen min Svardeya. The swarming of frogs is an occurrence or is a concept that is not unique about a frog. All of the creeping animals, this term, shirutz, they swarm, is the same terminology is used by all of them. So in other words, the pasuk is writing the word Svardeya, and it's not referring to the actual Svardeya itself, it's referring to the swarming of the Svardeya. Okay, but if it refers to the swarming has nothing to do with Svardeya. Many other creeping animals also swarm. So how could you say that the word Svardeya is referring to the swarming? The word Svardeya can't refer to that. The Fa bringt Rashi Raiv Vatihiya Kinam. So this is why Rashi is bringing the proof from what we see by the Makkah of Kinim, by the lice, was the Taich Kinam is Rechisha. The word Kinam over there means creeping, the creeping masses of lice. The word rechisha, which means the creeping, that's not something which is unique about lice. All these other little insects also are creeping. But nevertheless, when the Torah writes the word kinim, it doesn't refer to that one lice, but it means the creeping of the masses of lice. So we see that the Torah could be referring to the creeping of the lice, even though it doesn't indicate that at all. And not only that, creeping is something that's not unique about lice, but nevertheless, that's the meaning over there. In andere Werte, to say this in other words, if the way that Sfardim swarm would be different than the way other creeping animals swarm, is damol glattiker zu sagen, as Svardeya, let's skip the parentheses for a second, meint es euch sein ausgeteilt, sein spezielle Shirutz. Sein Ausgeteiltkeit, that is, sein speziellen Shirutz. If the fact was that the way that Sfardim are developed, or the way they are born and the way they swarm, is something which is, they swarm differently We're not talking specifically about being born, but the way they come out from the nilus and the way they swarm out of the nilus will be different than the way all other creeping animals swarm. So then, even though in the pasuk it doesn't specifically say shirut, it just says tzvardeya, but tzvardeya would indicate the unique swarming of this tzvardeya. That's why it says in a singular term. Going back now to the parentheses, the Rebbe says when the Torah uses the word tzvardeya, we can say punkt vies meint dem sheretz. The tzvardeya means this particular sheretz, the tzvardeya, the frog, which is eisgeteilt von alle andere shrotzim, different from all other kind of creeping animals, in eisen, eifiding, as a weiter, in its appearance, in its behavior, and so on. So too we could say that it's also different, that it has a unique way how it swarms, a unique behavior in its swarming. So even though the pasuk doesn't say the term shirut, it just says tzvardeya, but tzvardeya means the unique behavior of the tzvardeya. So that could be referring to, in the singular term, the swarming of the tzvardeya. Now the Rebbe adds over here, and this is something the Rebbe will focus on primarily in the next sif, Chotch and ganzen glattig is es nit, even though this is not smooth in the word tzvardeya itself, weil es hat gedarft sein a shinui im Wort, anders menukid v'chayetze bezeh, because even if the pasuk is not going to mention the word shirutz, just tzvardeya itself, and we'll say that tzvardeya indicates the swarming because it's a unique swarming, which is the unique nature of the behavior of the tzvardeya, but nevertheless, that's not tzvardeya. Tzvardeya is the name of the frog, the name of the animal itself. It should have been indicated somehow, some kind of a difference in the word itself. Al derech vi by kinim. Similar to what we find by kinim, state kinom. Over there it doesn't say kinim, it says kinom. So there's a change in the vowelization of the word kidlekaman, as the Rebbe will explain soon. So over here it does not change the vowelization. Here it just says tzvardeya. So therefore this is not completely smooth. Okay, but we'll see, as I said, we'll see that point in Siv Gimel. But now the thing is though, that this fact is not true. The swarming of frogs is no different. There's nothing unique about the nature of swarming of frogs than any other shrotzim, other creeping animals. Wie bald, aber as a postik sagt, demselben loschen shirutz, sei bei tzvardim, sei bei alle sheretz nefesh chaya. It's the same term of shirutz, of swarming, that's used regarding all these creeping animals. So it's not something which is unique to the appearance or the behavior, that is, of the tzvardeya. Is l'chayre schwer zu sagen as tzvardeya, so it's difficult to say that the word tzvardeya meint azach was is das selbe bei alle sheretz nefesh chaya. It's referring to something which is the same by all other creeping animals. The far is the rai vatia kinim kanal. So therefore Rashi has to bring the proof from kinim that by kinim it's the same thing. The creeping of the kinim is not the same. Is the same, like all other creeping animals. And nevertheless, the Torah, when it says Vatia Kinam in a singular term, is referring to the creeping of the Kinim. So that's understood. But the question over here is, move on, for was is by Rashi Pashut, as Vatia Kinim main Terchisha. So now let's compare what Rashi says here regarding Tzvardeya to what Rashi says regarding Kinim. When it comes to Tzvardeya, Rashi is unsure about this, and Rashi is bringing you a proof from Kinim. When it comes to Kinim, though, over there, it's obvious to Rashi that the meaning of Atehiyah Kinom means the rechisha, the creeping of the masses of the lice. Was the Far benugend sich dort Rashi mit Teich from rechisha, so Rashi is just satisfied by saying that Kinom over there means the creeping of the lice. Und Breitnit kein Rai of them, doesn't bring any proof for this. Breitnit kein zweiten Pirish, he doesn't bring a second pshat, like Rashi does here. And by Vatala Tzvardeya, but over here regarding the Tzvardeya, because of the problem that the Rebbe says we have, that the word Tzvardeya does not indicate the creeping of the Tzvardeya, or the swarming rather of the Tzvardeya, Zokter Unor al Zweiten Pirish, here Rashi brings this, and only as a second pshat, as Yesh Leimar, it could be said, Shiritz Atzvardim Kaira Loshin Yechidus, that the swarming of the Tzvardeya is in a singular term, the swarming of the Tzvardeya. And this is an unusual expression in Rashi, Yesh Leimar. This is like, if those that are familiar with learning Taisvus in the Gemara, that's usually the expression Taisvus uses. But Rashi uses this expression. It could be said that the Tzvardeya is Lashon Yechidus. So why is Rashi sort of hesitant, or he's saying this as a novelty that we can apply this to the word Tzvardeya? When it comes to Kinom, there Rashi just says it simply that that's the meaning of the words Vatia Kinom. So the Rebbe explains as follows, bringing from the Mefarshim here. Mefarshim and Masber. So the Mefarshim explain why Rashi is so sure about the pshat of Atiyah Kinam. As Rashi is hechrech zu teitschen v'tiyah kinam rechisha. What's forcing Rashi to say? That we see in the word of the pasuk itself, that vatihia kinam refers to the creeping of the kinam, not the kinam itself, but the creeping of it is fundem, was the lashon is kinam, nun kamutza. The fact that there's a kometz under the nun of this word, so it's a change in the word itself. Was is nit lashon rabim, kinim, so it's not the plural of lice, or nit lashon yachid, and it's also not the singular of lice, which is kina. So what's this word kinam? Und der Rebbe muss man sagen, as da meinte es nit im Shem von kinim, so therefore this is not the name, the noun, which is the name of kinim, whether it's many kinim or even one, nor der badait von echishas hakinim. It refers to the creeping of the kinim. So that's indicated in the fact that the Torah changed the nekuda by writing kinam. And like them is move on. So now, based on this, what the Mefarshim explain here, we could understand the Arichas and Rashi, how he is bringing this and applying this back to Tzfardeya, why Rashi presents it and writes it the way he does. As the far is das euch nit kein fulle Reihe, so therefore really, from Kinim, it's not a full proof as euch Tzfardeya means shiritz tzfardim, that Tzfardeya also means the swarming of Tzfardim. That's from the Lashon Vatal hat Tzfardeya, because in the word Tzfardeya in the pasuk there's no change in the vowelization, in the nekuda of Tzfardeya is nitok kenechoche, as this meint epis anders wie the namen von Tzfardeya b'lashon yachid. There's no indication that this is referring to anything other than Tzfardeya, the Tzfardeya, which is one singular, one Tzfardeya. And this is euch the diak in Rashi. And this is also the precise words in Rashi here that we can see that Rashi is proving it from Kinim, but at the same time applying it to Tzfardeya is a novelty. And Rashi is saying that we can possibly also say that this applies by Tzfardeya. V'chein v'tiyah Kinim, so he brings the raya from Kinim chulu, and then Rashi says v'af v'tala Tzfardeya, so too we could apply this to Tzfardeya. Onay vas is meisiv gruni grinu lira bala, sorry, and Rashi here adds the French that it's grinu lira. So what's the point? Why is Rashi adding this French? So here the Rebbe focuses on this laws of Rashi. Why is it necessary for Rashi to bring the French of this? And the Rebbe explains why it's problematic. Rashi never translates frogs in French. It's brought already in the Torah before a few times. Is doch verstandig, so why doesn't Rashi do that? Because it's understood. As Pirish Tzfardim is bavust, that the meaning of Tzfardim is known to the one that's learning. Is nachdem wie Rashi sagt shiritz Tzfardim, so after Rashi says that the meaning of Tzfardeya in this pasuk means the swarming of the Tzfardim, on Pirish Shirutz, Weisman, von Frier, and the translation of the word Shirutz, the swarming, so that's something that we also know from before. V'sharat haya'ar tzfardim, that the Ya'ar swarmed with tzfardim. It already says that before. So now we need a translation for the word tzfardeya. Now we need a translation for the word shirutz. So what exactly is vas tutoiv de balaz? So why is Rashi bringing this old French over here? Okay. Apparently, in this the way that Rabbi understands this, you cannot say that Rashi found this word in French that in a singular term means the swarming of frogs. That's not the fact. If you know French, I guess that's just not the fact. So that's not what Rashi means. So then why is Rashi bringing this word of grinolira balaz? Apparently in French, this word of grinolira balaz means the swarming of the tzvardim. But why does Rashi have to tell you the French translation if it's self-understood? No, the bavarim nishin dem. So, but now, based on the point that the Rebbe is saying here, that applying the pshat that he says regarding kinim is not so simple to applying it back to tzfardeya, because by kinim the Torah changed it to kinom. Over here the Torah just writes the word tzfardeya without changing the word. We can understand why Rashi is quoting the French to point out the chiddush of what he's saying. Tzfardeya belaz is grinoli. Tzfardeya, just the word tzfardeya itself, the frog, is grinoli. Was das weiß der Ben Chomish, that the child learning this knows, weil das ist doch sein Laz, that's his language. Französisch and euch biyamena. The Rebbe says this is in French, and it's actually not only in Old French, which is most of the Laz in Rashi, but even in French today, it's grinoli. I'm sure it's not pronounced exactly grinoli, if you'll ask someone to pronounce it in today's French, but it's pretty much this. I spoke to someone that speaks French, he says that this is basically what it is. On shirutz hatzfardim balaz, When you want to speak about the swarming of the tzvardim, verta shinui. So even in French, you can see that it's not exactly the same word. It's going to be a different word. You add something, grinolira. Valderech, and now, similar to the way this is in the Chumash regarding the kinim, with the shinui kinom, anstatt kinim, switching the word from kinim to kinom, valderech ze in zayin bala, similar would be regarding the French of the lice. So over there, it's not lice, and the swarming or the creeping of the lice is not exactly the same word. So Rashi over here is bringing you regarding the tzvardeya, that even though in the French we can see that the frog and the swarming of the frogs is not exactly the same word, but from deswegen, nevertheless, we're going to say here that va'af v'talat tzvardeya, that even though the Torah is writing the word tzvardeya, the same word tzvardeya without changing it, chashas is nitokin shini. It's the same word tzvardeya, which means the frog. Is there pirish grino lira balaz? Nit grinoli. Nevertheless, the meaning is the swarming of the frogs and not their frog, even though there should be a shini in the pasuk and there isn't, but nevertheless, that is the pshat in the pasuk over here. Okay, but now you may wonder, if so, why is there any proof whatsoever from kinim to our pasuk? By kinim, the Torah switched the word from kinim to kinam. Here it's the same word of tzvardeya, which means the frog, so how are we proving anything from kinim? So the Rabbi explains, there's still a proof here. Aber wie bald, as the Torah ruft fort on, the richisha sakinim, mit namen kinam. What we're proving from there is that the Torah refers to the creeping of the kinim with the term kinam, and it doesn't indicate b'chlal the creeping. Nit guckendig, was richisha hat zetan, nit bleisen mit dem Mim von kinim. The creeping is not a nature that's related at all to the kinim. That's a creeping of all kinds of creeping beings. And nevertheless, the word kinim, it means the creeping. Was das ist die Ikke-Schwierigkeit in dem Abteich von Kinim und Tzvardeya als Rechische und als Shidduch. That's really the main problem that Rashi has with saying that Kinim means the creeping or Tzvardeya means the swarming of the frogs. There's the other point that the Rebbe pointed out, that Tzvardeya, it's the same word that we're using whether we're referring to the tzvardeya or the swarming of the tzvardeya, or by kinim, it's the same, over there it's actually the Torah switched the word. But really the main question here is, there's no remez in the pasuk to the swarming or the creeping. And nevertheless, by kinim, even though there's no remez that is referring to creeping, because creeping is not a unique nature of the kinim itself, but that's what it means. Is the fa, yes shloima, so that's the proof. And Rashi says we could similar say over here as well, as oich tzvardeya by uns main shiritz tzvardim. That here as well, the word tzvardeya refers to the swarming of the tzvardim. That's the proof of Rashi. Okay, so after all of this, we understand what the pshat and the second pshat of Rashi is, and that how Rashi is putting this into the word tzvardeya. Now, so according to all of this, we would be able to explain and answer the question that the Rebbe had here on this. Why is Rashi bringing the pshat of the word tzvardeya after he brings the medrash? So we could explain, was Rashi is makdim the pirish ha medrash farden pirish al pi pshutai, weil der pshute beniden die dan is nit as a glatten muchrich kanal, because the simple pshat of the pasuk is not so smooth, and it's not even so it's not even so forced to say like it is by the case of kinim. By kinim, because the Torah switched the word to kinam, so that shows us that the Torah means something else. Over here, though, there's no change in the word, and therefore it's not so smooth in the word tzvardeya itself. Okay, so we can understand why Rashi brings the medrash first. But the Rebbe comes there and points out an unbelievable thing. Just one word in Rashi, which will show us that this is not the reason why Rashi brings the pshat of pshutai after the medrash. In Emerson, Kemenet Zagen, the truth is, though, we cannot say that this is the reason. As nor to leave them, was is Rashi magdim, then pirish ha-medrash, farden pirish shiritz ha-tzvardim. That this is the only reason why Rashi brings the medrash first before it brings the pshat of shiritz ha-tzvardim, the swarming of the tzvardim. Or by Hagdem, the Rebbe gives the following introduction. When Rashi brings a simple pshat, and Rashi himself tells you that this is this simple pshat, there are two ways that Rashi says this. When Rashi wants to tell you that the pshat is telling you fits with the simple pshat, and it's not just a drash, it's not expounding on the pasuk out of the pshat, but nutzich Rashi mit the bituyim, so Rashi has two ways how he expresses this. Aleph, wie in unser Fall, in our case, Rashi says upshutai, and it's pshat. That's it. Beis upshuta shel mikra. Other times Rashi says that this is the pshat of the pasuk, the pshat of the whole mikra here. So what's the difference? The Chelek zwischen Zeh is moving in pashtus. The difference between these two expressions is very simple and understood. The Oster upshuta shel mikra, the pshat when Rashi says this is the pshat of the pasuk, meant as the pirish is like the pshat from the mikra. That the pshat that he's telling you now is the simple understanding of the whole pasuk from them klolos digen teichen hakasik, of the general content of this pasuk. That kegen der loshin upshutai, when Rashi says, and this is it's simple pshat, on them siyum shel mikra, without the conclusion of saying the whole pasuk here, meint that this is the pirish hapashet blois from them vart, that this is the simple meaning of just this word itself, or the inyan, or whether it's a subject that Rashi is discussing, but not necessarily the context of the entire pasuk. Of welche Rashi stellt sich on, which Rashi is speaking about. Hagamis can sein, as is nit masem zu pashtus und klosigen inhalt. It could be that it's still not fitting with the general content of the pasuk. That's what the meaning of pshuta is. So here, what does Rashi say? Rashi brings the second pshat and he says, upshutai, what's the simple pshat of the word svardeya? So the problem over here is, daf lefiza is kommen benidden didan. So what should come out over here in our case is as follows. Oib mizal annemen as das was Rashi is makdim dem pirish am medrish fahren pirish al pi pshuta. If we'll accept the point that we said before, why does Rashi bring the medrash that they hit it and swarms of frogs came out? So why is he bringing that before the simple pshat that it just means the swarming of frogs? Is the far val the taich shiris atzvardim? The reason is because the actual translation of this swarming of frogs in the word of tzvardeya lit nit in vart tzvardeya. It's just not there in the actual word of tzvardeya. So the issue that Rashi has is with the actual word tzvardeya. That's the problem with the second pshat, and in that sense the first pshat is better because the first pshat is more literal in the actual word. Hat tzvardeya, just one tzvardeya. Mashenken like in Pirish HaMedrash was a taich from tzvardeya is kipshuta, ein tzvardeya, just one tzvardeya. If that's the pshat, hotach Rashi gedaft zogin. So then when Rashi brings the second pshat, so what should Rashi say? Nit upshutai, that he's only bringing you the second pshat because this is the simple translation of this word, stam from vart, this word here. The swarming of the tzvardim, the advantage of this pshat is that it's a simple translation of the word, because it's not. Nor upshuta shel mikra chulu. Rashi should be saying that true, according to the Medrash, that is the simple translation of the word tzvardeya, that there was actually only one tzvardeya. But the second pshat he's bringing you is more in the context of the pasuk. It's more the simple pshat, the swarming of the frogs that covered the entire Mitzrayim. Das says that what this means is, why is this pshuta shel mikra? Why is the second pshat more fitting with the context of the pasuk, even though the word itself is not better understood than the first pshat? Ibalt, as the Rebbe already pointed out earlier, says Nitok Kain Remez, there's no hint in the pasuk, l'chayre seemingly in Hemshech HaPasuk, in the continuation of the pasuk. In other words, we're not just focusing on the word, but if you look at the continuation of the pasuk, there's no hint of nes nechilim to this nest that the Medrash says that they hit it and the streams of frogs came out. The far is at the erste pirish, like medrashay. So therefore, the first pshat, which is according to the medrash, a nes was werter is gelernt, like derech hadrashe b'teire, a nes that's taught according to understanding the pasuk with drash. So that's the drash which is not fit with the context of the whole pasuk, that doesn't indicate this miracle. Only if pshuta shel mikra, what Rashi should be saying is, but if you want to look at the pshat of the whole context of the pasuk that doesn't indicate this miracle, daf ois kumen as the pshat from vatal atzvardeya is shiritz atzvardim, that the meaning of vatal atzvardeya means that there was swarms of frogs that came out from the Nilus. That's what Rashi should have said. But the second pshat is not actually better understood in the actual word tzvardeya. As the Rebbe pointed out already before, it's not smooth at all to say that the word tzvardeya means the shirutz of the tzvardim. So why is Rashi saying upshutai, that this is the pshat of the word as opposed to pshuta shel mikra? Seemingly that's the only advantage that it has over the first pshat, which is not pshutai in the context of the whole pasuk. We don't find this miracle mentioned here in the pasuk. Okay, the Rebbe now here in the next sif will point out another big question that the Mefarshim have on this Rashi. And this will actually explain to us that the first pshat that Rashi brings from the Medrash does have a certain advantage, not only regarding the meaning of the word, but also regarding the context of the whole pasuk. So Nochat Miyah in Pirish Rashi, there's another question here, a very strong question that the Mefarshim ask on Rashi. Rashi Alein touched in Onei Parshas Vayishlach. Rashi himself already translated in the beginning of Parshas Vayishlach as Derech Eretz Loima al Shvarim Harbe Shoy. The way people speak when they refer to many oxen, they refer to it as one, a singular, one ox. That explains why it says there, Vayehi li Shor v'chamoyer, that is just one. As meken rufen asach von ein min b'loshen yachid al shema min. You can refer to many with the singular term that it's one because we're referring to this kind, to this species. We're not referring to all the many of it, but we're referring to the min. If so, Rashi should explain here simply as vatal hatzvardeya meant harbe tzvardim, that when it says vatal hatzvardeya in the singular term, it means many tzvardim swarmed out of the Nilus. Und das, was steht b'loshen yachid, is this al shema min. The reason it says singular is because it's referring to the min of tzvardeya, like Rashi himself already said regarding the term shor in Parshas Vayishlach. So the Mefarshim answer and explain why Rashi doesn't say this here. As by Rashi is doshver the shini aloshin in posik, is because here Rashi is really coming to address the change in the expression of this word tzvardeya regarding the whole posik. But Rashi is not only bothered by the one word hatzvardeya that it says, but in the context of the posik. In Hemshich from the parsha where the makke der mont ganze 10 mal beloshen rabben tzvardim. In the continuation of the parsha when it talks about this makke, so the tzvardim are mentioned here 10 times, and it's always in the plural term of tzvardim. Tofavas is the pasuk punkt dam mishane und schreibt b'loshen yachid. So why is the Torah here the first time, or this time actually? I don't think it's the first time. It already speaks before about the makkah. Why is the Torah this time changing and using a singular term vatal hatzvardeya, that the tzvardeya, one tzvardeya came up? That's really what's bothering Rashi. So there's a question in the context of the change of the other times in the psukim here where it uses the term tzvardim. Is the fungedrungen. So from this, Rashi says we can prove as das meint nit al shema min. That over here when it says hatzvardeya, it's not referring to one tzvardeya al shema min, because then it would have said the same by all the other times. Nor the pasuk meint dam madgish zayin dam loshen yachid. The reason why the Torah is stressing over here that it was one tzvardeya, because here when we're speaking about how the makkah began, so it's saying the singular term because this is how it happened right in the beginning, that there was one tzvardeya, und the fat taish Rashi tzvardeya achas ha'isavucholo, the pshat that he brings from the medrash, that there was one tzvardeya and they hit this one tzvardeya. So Rashi is bringing the medrash to answer a question that there is not only in the singular term of this word, but b'chlal in the context of the pasuk here. The change, why here it says the singular term. Let them is move on. So according to this, it's understood as the Pirish HaMedrash, that the pshat that Rashi is bringing from the Medrash, Chotshazad Rashi. Yes, we're expounding on the pasuk, and it's not the simple meaning of the pasuk. Hotas aber Yisrael ofen Pirish Shirutz Hatzfardim. This pshat has an advantage in the meaning that in the second pshat that Rashi says that the singular term means the swarming of the Tzfardim mitzadem Teichen Aksuvim. Also because of the context of the psukim here, Pshute Shel Mikra. Not only the pshat of this word, but the first pshat has an advantage besides the advantage in the word itself, which the Rabbi already explained before, but it also has an advantage in the context of the psukim. It's only according to the pshat of the medrash is verstandig was da steht vatal hatzvardeya b'loshen yachid. We could understand why it says only here this term vatal hatzvardeya in the singular term b'loshen yachid. Now you may ask, wait a minute, isn't this question answered also according to the second pshat of Rashi? The second pshat of Rashi is Vatal Tzvardeya refers to the swarming of the Tzvardeya. So because we're talking about the beginning of the Makkah, how they swarmed, so that's why it says Hatzvardeya Loshen Yachid here. So can't we say that even according to the second pshat of Rashi, this question is answered as well, the change of why here it says this different than all the other times, Loshen Rabin. So the Rebbe explains, no, it will not, according to the second pshat, this question is not fully answered. But according to the second pshat that Rashi brings, that it refers to Shiritz Tzvardim, the swarming of the Tzvardim. Hagam as oich loitem pirish vert faremfet. Yes, it does partially answer the question of why the Torah is saying here Loshen Yachid. Pavasa steht nit umetum in parsha b'Loshen Yachid. Why the Torah doesn't always say in the singular term Varum the Loshen Yachid passed nor dan when it's retzach wegen Shiritz Tzvardim, because the Loshen Yachid is only possible when we're talking about the beginning of the Makkah, when they swarmed out of the Nilus, and the rest rest of the Makkah, it's not talking about how it swarmed out of the Nilus. So there, it is the pasuk can't use the term B'lashon Yachid. So it does partially answer this question. Okay, so that's why Rashi is bringing specifically this pshat and not the pshat that he brought in Parshas Vayishlach, Hashem Amin. Is aber die Schwierigkeit verkehrt. However, there will be another question here according to the second pshat of Rashi, and therefore the second pshat does not really answer why it says here the singular term, if we'll say it's referring specifically to the swarming, how it came out. Why not? Es hat euch da gedarft sein b'lashon rabim. Because the question is, it should have always used the plural term, and including here, even when it speaks about the swarming of the frogs, when it originally came out, but still, it could use the plural term over here as well. True, all other times when the Torah speaks about Svardeya, it can't use the plural term, because over there we're not talking about how it swarmed out of the Nilus. Over there it just says Svardim, many Svardim that filled the whole Eretz Mitzrayim. But even here, when it's speaking about the swarming of the frogs in the beginning of the Makkah, it still could use the plural term. And the Rebbe says, as we see right here in the continuation of the pasuk, the lashon yachid is nidglatik. The lashon yachid, using the singular term of tzvardeya regarding the swarming of the frogs, is not smooth. Why? Vibalta steht gleich nachdem. Vayasu keina chatumim vayalo es asvardim. Even when the pasuk speaks about when the Mitzrayim themselves, the chatumim of the Mitzrayim, the sorcerers of the Mitzrayim, they themselves also created this makkah by bringing out the swarming of the tzvardim of the Nilos. So there it does say the plural term. So even regarding the swarming, when it comes out of the Nilos, the Torah uses the plural term. You could use the plural term regarding the swarming. So why doesn't the Torah use over here as well regarding the swarming this lashon rabim? That's the question that remains according to the second question. So that's the advantage in the first pshat. According to the first pshat, the tzvardeya is answered. Why dafka here it says tzvardeya? According to the second pshat, it's partially answered. We understand that this place is different. We're talking about the swarming, and therefore it's different than the rest of the times. By the other times, it's impossible to say tzvar deya lashon yachid because it's not talking about the swarming. But on the other hand, though, when we talk about the swarming, the Torah talks about the swarming of the tzvardim twice. When the Makkah was done through Aaron, and then when the Chartumim did it. By the Chartumim, even regarding the swarming, it also says tzvardim lashon rabim. So here the question becomes, what's the difference between these two places? And the Ha'ara, the Rebbe points out that this question is not as strong as a question as if you compare it to all the other times when the Torah says, another 10 times when the Torah says the term tzvardim. That's a much bigger question. And that's why Rashi B'chlal doesn't bring the pshat of the min, because then you'll have the question, speaking about the min, that's something the Torah could have said all the time. But speaking about the swarming of the tzvardim, we have the Torah speaking about this twice. When Aaron did the Makkah, and when the Chartumim copied this. And for some reason, the second time it says tzvardim lashon rabim, and the first time it says tzvardeya lashon yachid. So that still remains a question. So the first pshat of Rashi, the Medrash, is better understood both in the word tzvardeya itself, but even also in the pshuta shel mikra, in the context of the pasuk, when it switches tzvardeya lashon yachid from the lashon rabim and all the other psukim. Und der Fa bringt es Rashi als zweitem pshat. So this explains why Rashi brings the pashat pshat only as a second pshat. Und the Pirish HaMedrash is the erste und Iker Pirish lefi pshutoi shal mikra. Not only the pashat pshat of the word, but also the pashat pshat in the context of the shinui, in the change of this word from all the other times when it says tzvardim in the pasuk. However, this doesn't yet answer the question that the Rebbe asked before. Why Rashi uses the word when he describes why he's bringing the second pshat. Rashi says this is pshutoi. Says aber noch halt nicht verempfet. This still doesn't answer the question we asked before. Mit was is the zweite Pirish mehr pshutoi in Teich von die Werte? Batala tzvadeya. So what's the advantage in the second pshat? Why Rashi seems to be saying that there's an advantage in the second pshat in the words vatala tzvadeya, wie the Pirish HaMedrash, more than the pshat of the Medrash. According to what we're saying here, the advantage of the first pshat is in the word tzvardeya. And also in the context of the pasuk, why it changes to the singular tzvardeya. What's the mila in the second pshat? There's a certain mila in the pasuk, in the context of the whole pasuk, as I've already pointed out before, because there's no indication in the pasuk to this miracle that the first pshat says, but there is no advantage in the second pshat regarding the word tzvardeya. So why is Rashi saying pshutoi? This is the pshat of the word itself. Okay, so the Rebbe here will explain this, and as you already see indicated in the way the Rebbe asks the question here, The Rebbe says that how is it that the second pshat is pshutoi in taich from the verter vatal atzvardeya. So now the Rebbe will point out that Rashi brings from the pasuk these two words, vatal hatzvardeya. So apparently the second pshat is not necessarily more pashut regarding the word tzvardeya itself, but it's more pashut in the words vatal hatzvardeya. Let's see. Is the beard in them? So the explanation here is as follows. There's actually another point yet that Rashi really is coming to explain. Das, was Rashi is eisen zu bavaren, what Rashi here is coming to clarify in the pasuk is nid bloß die Schwierigkeit mit zadem shini loshen. It's not only the difficulty that there's a change, that all of a sudden before it said Sfardim, and all of a sudden now it says Svardeya. No noch mehr, but the question actually is even more. Der Loshen Vatala Tzvardeya, the Loshen Yochid, when it says here Vatala Tzvardeya, that once Svardeya came up using the singular term, is Eichen Stire. This is a contradiction. Zum Ansag von dem Eibischen zu Aaron in Frieden Pasuk. This is a contradiction to the command that it says earlier in the pasuk that Hashem commanded Aaron. The word v'ha'al is, and you bring up all the tzvardim, the swarms of tzvardim. So how could the pasuk not say vatal hatzvardeya, that all Aaron did is vatal hatzvardeya? So the Rabbi explains now that this term v'ha'al is unique regarding this makkah. When it says that you bring up the tzvardim, nit wie bei Makkes Arbe. Unlike what it says by the Makkah of Arbe, where it states Nitei Yotchal Eretz Mitzrayim, and there it says B'shvil Makkes ha'arbe vayo'al gomer, or v'ya'al. I think I'm not sure exactly how it's read, but over there it doesn't say v'ha'al, you bring it up, but it says v'ya'al, you put your hands with the stick towards the heaven, and v'ya'al, it'll come up. That's what it means there. Similar, it says by other makkahs that Rabbi brings in the Hara. So, but over here it says v'ha'al, speaking to Aaron, you should bring up all the tzvardim. Is move on as the tziv with Aaron. What was the mitzvah? What was Aaron commanded to do? Is nit bagerenet blois to the hachana on aschalaf on the teis yotcha b'matcha goyim. It's not just limited to the preparation and bringing the tzvardim up by placing your hands, and then the tzvardim will come up on their own. Nor dafes oisfirim bis zu areiv bringen die tzvardim bepoil mamish in a ribuy v'halas tzvardim. That this is part of what Aaron has to do. That Aaron has to bring up all the tzvardim, whatever that includes. He has to keep the stick there, and it miraculously will until all the tzvardim come up. But if so, the question is, vi hoteres mekayim givem? How did Aaron fulfill this command? Beisel Poil is given an Eifen from Vatal hat Tzvardeya, ain't Tzvardeya. When Aaron put a stick there and only one Tzvardeya came up. That's really the question over here. How did Aaron fulfill this mitzvah that the Eibusha said, V'ha'al hat Tzvardeim, that you should bring up all the Tzvardeim? The Far is Rashi Mefarish. So therefore Rashi explains, V'hoyu makin noisa v'hi matezes nechilim nechilim. So Rashi explains that yes, there's one Tzvardeya, but the Mitzrim hit it, and it streamed from it streams and streams of tzvardim. What does this mean? What does the word matezes really mean? This is a unique word, and here the Rebbe will explain what's the diak of this word. When Aaron put his hand, so what did he bring up? Only one. Es is aber given as that tzvardeya was matezes nechilim. But this was one tzvardeya that matezes means that it swarmed, or maybe the translation of matezes would mean it sort of splashed. It sprayed and splashed out of it. The Rebbe translates, he spritzt. It sprays or splashes out of it other tzvardim. What's the uniqueness of this word? Al derech v'az meklapt al meme mitzrayim. It's just like if you take a stick and you actually bang the water, spritzt Wasser. What happens? The water splashes. It is wird beschaffen noch Wasser eigentlich yesh. What happens is, the term matezes, spritz, does not mean that there's more water that's created from the existing water, but that the water itself splashes and sort of splits into many drops of water. So too was regarding the tzvardeya that came out from the water of Mitzrayim, that what happened is it was taka one tzvardeya, but that very one tzvardeya itself splashed and split into many tzvardim. And now the Rebbe adds, und es ist kein nafgemin in it, wer es klappt. And therefore it makes no difference who it is that hit this tzvardeya that is. The far is Rashi mashmit, dem Wort hoyu Mitzrayim. Therefore Rashi actually skips this word that it says in the Medrash that it was the Mitzrayim that hit this one Tzvardeya. They were sort of annoyed by this massive frog, and therefore they hit the Tzvardeya trying to kill it. That's what you would seem the Medrash is trying to say. And instead, not only did they not kill it, it actually produced more Tzvardim. But Rashi, so seemingly that's a detail in what happened here. But Rashi skips that because that's not the point that the Mitzrayim hit it. The point of here is to explain that this one Tzvardeya itself splashed and split into many Tzvardim. And therefore, Aaron HaKohen is fulfilling V'halas HaTzvardim by this one Tzvardeya that's now splashing into many. Verstandig. So this answers the first question in the Sikhe, why Rashi is choosing specifically this pshat and not the other pshatim that it says in Gemara and Medrash. Favos Rashi can da net einteichen wie in Gemara and Shmais Rabbe, why Rashi doesn't explain like in the Gemara and the Medrash, which is either as Sharkalem Veheim Bo, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's pshat, that this Tzvardeya whistled and the other Tzvardim came, or the Hishritzo Malak al Eretz Mitzrayim, that it swarmed and it gave birth and it filled the entire Eretz Mitzrayim. While, like them, Veto is coming, because according to that it would come out as Aaron hat bepoil aufgebracht nit mehr wie ein Tzvardeya. That Aaron brought up just one Tzvardeya. So he didn't at all fulfill the mitzvah that the Eibusher said, V'ha'al. On the Ribuya Tzvardim and the many Tzvardim that then followed later, hat sich aufgetan durch Shrike or Sharka or the Hishritza. That's something that the frog by itself whistled, or Hishritza, it gave birth to many Tzvardim. B'meile hat mit dem nit mekayim given dem tzivi v'halas hatzvardim. So he did not fulfill the mitzvah of v'halas hatzvardim to bring up the many tzvardim. The farm was Rashi bringing them pirish as matezes nechilim. So therefore Rashi brings the pshat that it says in another medrash matezes nechilim, that this one tzvardeya itself that Aaron brought up, it split or splashed into many tzvardim. So therefore that's to some extent a fulfillment of the v'ha'al. Even though B'payal there was just one tzvardeya that came up, but this very one tzvardeya split into many tzvardim. In the end of the Sikha, we'll see the Rebbe says that this is not yet a full fulfillment of the mitzvah to some extent. Okay, we'll see. But Rashi brings this because according to the other pshatim, so Aaron did not fulfill the mitzvah at all. V'ha'al es tzvardim, the many tzvardim. Okay, so now bringing this back over here to what the pasuk says when it says Vatal tzvardeya. That when Aaron fulfills what the Eibusher commands of him, that's what the pasuk is really coming to say. That what did Aaron do? He took the stick and he fulfilled what Hashem told him. He took the stick and vayet Aaron es yoda and vatal tzvardeya, that he fulfilled what Hashem told him. Now vibalt the pasuk sagt beferish as the tziv v'itza Aaron is given v'halas hatzvardim lashon rabim. The pasuk says specifically that the mitzvah was that he should bring up many tzvardim, plural. Muslim pasuk euch sein nirmaz al kapanim v'azay erat dem tzivi mekayim given. So the pasuk at least should be hinting how Aaron fulfilled it. That's similarly what the pasuk what the pasuk is coming to say. He took the stick and he put it, he hit it on the nilus, and the tzvardeya came up. So where is hinted over here in the language of the pasuk itself that he fulfilled the mitzvah of bringing up many tzvardim? Is the beard in them? So the explanation is, and here we focus on the word vatal. Vatal atzvardeya can geteilt werden auf zwei Fanim. The words vatal atzvardeya could be translated in two ways. Aleph, one, and the simpler way to translate this is the tzvardeya is aufgegangen. The tzvardeya came up. But Beis, another way to translate vatal atzvardeya als mafil. It caused to come up. Die tzvardeya hat gemacht aufgehen. That this tzvardeya caused others to come up, andere tzvardim. Vatal hat tzvardeya, this tzvardeya caused coming up of tzvardim. That's another way to teach the word vatal. Of course, that's not the simple pshat of the pasuk, but it could be teached this way. We're explaining here how we would interpret this pasuk according to the Medrash. On die zwei pratim in Pirish HaMedrash. So these are the two details here that we have to teach the word vatal according to the Medrash. Aleph, as Aaron hat aufgebracht, ein tzvardeya. One is that the word vatal means that Aaron brought up one tzvardeya. Und Beis, as die tzvardeya hat meile gewen andere. That over here, vatal will mean that he also, this tzvardeya caused others to come up. So werden angedatet in die zwei Teitschen. So these two details, according to the Medrash, is hinted in the two ways of how to interpret the word vatal. Ale vatal atzvadeya, which is tzvadeya achasaisa, that there was just one tzvadeya. And also vatal atzvadeya means matezes nechilim, that this one tzvadeya came up, it caused to come up more and more. It was splashing more and more of the streams of these tzvardim. So that these are two. So the Medrash basically is being mechadish that the word vatal has two meanings in it. Damit wird euch verstandig. Now we'll understand another point here. Was Rashi bringt dem Drash? Why does Rashi bring this Drash? This pshat on vatal atzvadeya. That vihi matezes nechilim, that it streams of tzvardim came out of it. Of the verte vatal atzvadeya. Why Rashi brings down these two words vatal atzvadeya unit oy vatachas eretz Mitzrayim. Why Rashi doesn't explain this on vatachas eretz Mitzrayim? So what the Rebbe is indicating over here is, why does Rashi just bring these two words from the pasuk vatal atzvadeya? Vatal atzvadeya itself is not really the only question that we have here. The question is, how does one tzvadeya cover the entire Eretz Mitzrayim? How is that possible? I mean, besides the question that the Rebbe said, that already in the words vatal atzvadeya itself, there is a question, because before in the Torah it already says tzvar de'im, and the command was tzvar de'im. But over here in this pasuk, when it says vatachas Eretz Mitzrayim, so seemingly vatal atzvadeya, Rashi should also say his pshat regarding vatachas Eretz Mitzrayim, that the nechilim, that's the only way you can cover the entire Eretz Mitzrayim. But Rashi doesn't bring the continuation of the pasuk. So rather, Rashi is coming to explain the meaning of the words vatal atzvadeya. That according to the Medrash, we're adding a second pshat, vatal atzvadeya. Vatal atzvadeya means that the tzvardeya came up, but also that it caused to come up. It caused all the other tzvardim to stream from it. So again, the reason why this is hinted in the words vatal is because that's the whole point of the pasuk here, to tell us how Aaron fulfilled Hashem's command. So we have to say, according to the Medrash, that this is the meaning of vatal atzvadeya. But now we'll understand, going back to what the Rebbe asked before, why when Rashi brings the second pshat, Rashi says the second pshat is actually the pashup pshat of the words vatal atzvadeya. The advantage of the second pshat is not only regarding the context of the pasuk, that there's a miracle that is not indicated in the pasuk, that the first pshat says, and according to the second pshat we don't have to rely on this miracle, but this is actually also more simpler in the words of the pasuk here. Hagam der Pirish hat an Anhalt in Lashon HaPasuk canal. So the pshat that Rashi brings from the Medrash can be put into the words of Vatal. Doch sagt Rashi of them azeu Medrashi. But Rashi says that this is just Medrash. Weil dem Pirish muss man sagen, as die zwei verschiedene Teitschen, Oifanim, from Vatal Atzvadeya, we're going to have to say that these two different interpretations and parts of what happened there regarding the Vatal Atzvadeya haben beide passiert. They both actually happened. There was one tzvardeya that came up, and that one tzvardeya caused others to come up. Was das ist nicht ausgehalten, leuten derech Hapshat von lernen, Mikra, sis der derech von Midrashay. It's not the pshat of a word. When the Torah says a word, it's not including two different pshatim. Vatal atzvadeya means one thing. This tzvardeya came up. To say that vatal means two different things is not the simple pshat of the pasuk. It's only the medrash of the pasuk. Like pshutoi. But if you want to translate the words vatal atzvadeya itself, darf es geteilt werden auf ein Haufen. It has to be translated just in one way. Vatal wie der Hemshech vatachas. Vatal means just like vatachas later in the pasuk, and it covered. So muss man lernen, as mit tzvardeya, beloshin yachid, wird gemein, shiritz tzvardim. If vatal means that it came up, and it doesn't mean that it caused to come up, which would point to the pshat of the Medrash, that it splashed more tzvardim from it, but vatal just means that it came up, just like vatachas. So then we'll have to say that, how does it say loshin yachid? And the answer is shiritz tzvardim. The streams of tzvardim is, or the shiritz tzvardim, the swarming of tzvardim is loshin yachid. Okay, so that explains why the second pshat is based on the words vatal atzvardeya, unlike the first pshat that you have to put two meanings into the words vatal atzvardeya in order to explain how Aaron fulfilled his mitzvah. Von des wegen, but nevertheless the Rebbe concludes this inyan here, going back to things that we already brought earlier in the Siche. Bringt es Rashi als zweiten Pirish. Rashi only brings the second pshat as a second pshat. On the Pirish ikri is medrashay. The main pshat is the first pshat, even though it's medrash. Weil, for the following two reasons, which we pointed out before. Aleph number one, mitzad teichen aksuvim, looking at the context of the psukim here, is the Pirush HaMedrash mer masim zu pshute shel mikra. So the pshat of the Medrash fits more with the context of the psukim. As the Rebbe explained before, dafka, according to the Medrash, we have fully answered why it changes tzfardeya from tzfardim, b'loshen rabbim in the other places, whereas according to the second pshat, that it refers to swarms, the swarms of the tzfardim, it doesn't explain why when the chartumim did so, it does use a plural term. And Beis, another point we said before already, oich der etzem uptouch from vart tzfardeya, also the very translation of this one word, tzfardeya, the frog, is mer glatig leiten pirish from Medrash. It's much smoother according to the Medrash that it was actually just one frog. Vi leiten pirish, as das meant, shit, it says fardim. And then the pshat that it says, according to the second pshat, that it means the swarming of the frogs, kanal sif gimel, as the Rebbe explained at length before, that even though Rashi proves it from what it says by kinim, but it's not the same by tzfardeya, where there's no shini in the word, and it's not smooth in the word tzfardeya. But again, even though the word tzfardeya in that sense is less understood than the first pshat, but the two words of atala tzfardeya, the simple pshat of these words, to say that Aaron fulfilled the mitzvah, is dafka according to the second pshat, not according to the first pshat. And according to the first pshat, the only way you have a remez in the pasuk that Aaron fulfilled what he was told, v'halas hatzfardim, is by saying that vatal hatzfardeya includes two pirushim, that it came up and it caused to come up more. And therefore, in that sense, the second pshat is actually pshutoi, the pshat of this word. Of these words, these two words of Atal Tzfardeya. Von Yemesh shel Torah in Pirish Rashi. A deeper point in the wine of Torah that we could see here in Rashi. As is Farana Klal, there's a rule that Chazal tell us, and Rashi brings this later also in Parshas Eikev. As a maschel b'mitzvah, oimrim lo gemar. One that begins a mitzvah, we tell him that he should be the one to complete it. And this goes very far, that Chazal even warned about the very harsh punishments, God save us, was kommen zu lieb dem, was man kein Goyme sein, is nid Goymer a mitzvah. When a person begins a mitzvah and he has the opportunity to complete it, and he does not. So now the Rebbe will apply this, as we'll see back over here, to what we're speaking about, Aaron fulfilling his mitzvah of Vahalas HaTzfardim, that he should be the one to bring up the Tzfardim. V'yisei mizu, and this actually is applied even more so, ubefrat, by learning Torah met atzveiten. When you're learning Torah with another Yid. Dav zayin tosem lefneim, you have to learn and teach the Torah and put it out for him very clearly, k'shulchan ha'aruch u'muchan lechel lefnei adam. As Rashi brings in the beginning of Parshas Mishpatim, just like a prepared table with food that's ready to eat, bring and explain the halachas in such a way that it should be fully understood. So this is even more than by a mitzvah. Especially by learning, when you want him to understand ideas, it has to be fully explained. So that's what Chazal tell us usually. But then there's a flip side to this. On the other hand, if a Yid knows as tzlib gewisse unvermeidliche sibis, that for certain unavoidable reasons, that the ungeheibene mitzvah nit kennen geime sein. The mitzvah that he begins, he will not be able to complete it. So he may say to himself, so let me not even start this mitzvah at all. So he may not hold himself back from going ahead to start this mitzvah, and to at least fulfill that portion of the mitzvah that is possible for him. And as we find, the case was by Moshe Rabbeinu, as at Mavdu gewen die Gimel Arim Miklot in Evera Yarden, that Moshe Rabbeinu went and separated the three cities of the Ir Miklot, the Arim Miklot, on the other side of the Yarden, on the east side of the Yarden, outside of Eretz Yisrael, even though they will not be active, they won't absorb anyone that killed someone accidentally that has to run into the Ir Miklot, until the ones in Eretz Yisrael, the three cities of refuge in Eretz Yisrael, will be separated. So why did he separate these that he had an opportunity to do, but they won't have any effect? It's not active yet. So he said, whatever I can fulfill, I will do right now. So we see that Moshe Rabbeinu was ready to begin a mitzvah, even though he knew for a fact that he will not be able to complete the mitzvah. Okay, so now the Rebbe comes back over here to the way this is by the Tzfardeya here, but with one more introduction. We'll move on. So now it's understood as a suffix in them. Sometimes there's a situation where there's a doubt in the matter regarding completing the mitzvah. Can you complete the mitzvah? How do you complete the mitzvah? And the Rebbe gives two examples. Was is gemar ushleimus mitzvah? When it's not clear what exactly is the completion of the mitzvah. So is b'mitzvahs al derech from tzedakah, when it comes to mitzvahs, like the mitzvah of tzedakah, is kol amar ba'areza meshubach. So over here, regarding such a mitzvah, a person shouldn't say, if I can't give $10,000 to tzedakah and I can't complete this mitzvah, if there's a kala, for example, and there's a mitzvah of achnasas kala, and I can't cover the costs of the wedding completely, so I'm not going to do anything. You give as much as you can, and the more you can add, the more praiseworthy it is. That's over there in a situation where you have a doubt regarding how much of the mitzvah is demanded of you to do. Even if you can't complete the entire mitzvah, the more you do, the better it is. But then you have a different situation, sort of the opposite. B'mitzvahs al derech von malchus, by a mitzvah similar to malchus, lashes. When a yid is chayiv malchus, is over there the Torah says lo yosef pen yosef, that the lashes that he has to be hit is the exact amount, but you may not add even one more. You're not allowed to hit a Jew. Bizvanet l'das kama, according to some in commentaries, is batzri rabbanan chode. The Chachamim interpreted the pshat in the pasuk when it says in the Torah lashes. The number that says in the Torah is arbaim, and the Chachamim interpreted in the meaning of the words of the pasuk that it really means 39 and not 40. Mitzadem chshash pen yosef. Because of the concern that if you will say that you actually give 40, you may add more than what the Torah means that you should give. So therefore you give 39, not to add one that he doesn't deserve. Right? So over here in such a situation where you have a suffix what the mitzvah is, so over here Chachamim come and say we have two ways to teach the words of the pasuk. When it says arbaim yakenu, either the arbaim yakenu could mean literally 40, or we can interpret the mitzvah to be less, 39. So in other words, how are we going to complete this mitzvah? What is the taich of the pasuk in order to complete the mitzvah? So over here, you have to be machmir and say that it means 39 in order not to add something, pen yosef, to add more than what you're not supposed to hit him. So we see that when it comes to the concept of to finish a mitzvah, sometimes it's impossible for a person to finish a mitzvah, and you just have to add as much as possible. And sometimes actually, because of a concern that when you add, it'll be more than what you're supposed to do, so therefore, so we just say, leave it at what it is. Don't give a malchus more than what's necessary. So the Rebbe will apply this over here regarding the makkah of tzvardeya on a few levels. Now over here, regarding the makkah of tzvardeya, we're also talking about a makkah, about an einish of hitting and punishing, plaguing the Mitzrayim. So the plague has to be exactly what it is, but you can't plague them more than what they deserve, more than what Hashem says. Okay, but the Rebbe introduces this in the beginning in there's different stages of how this is brought here. Let's see. Al derech zeh is der Unterschied zwischen die zwei Pirushim in Rashi. So similar, we can understand the difference between the two Pirushim that Rashi brings here. Leuten ersten Pirush kumtais. According to the first pshat that Rashi says it was just one Sfardeya that came out when Aaron hit his stick on the Nilos. As Aaron had aufgetan dem Halas at Sfardim, yes, Aaron did accomplish the Halas at Sfardim, that he brought up all the Sfardim, as Rashi explained, because this one Sfardeya split and splashed into many Sfardim. But the real point of this makkah, which is to plague all the Mitzrayim wherever they were, to cover the entire Mitzrayim, is gekommen später durch die was hayomaken. That the continuation of the fulfillment of this makkah came through those that hit this tzvardeya, and then it spread in the entire and covered the entire Mitzrayim. So in that sense, Aaron didn't fully complete the actual plague to cover Mitzrayim. But according to the second shot, kumtais, it comes out as Aaron hat aufgetan dem ganzen Shiritz Sfardim. Aaron was the one that he placed his hand or his stick on the Nilus, and all the swarms of the Sfardim came out through him. Was hat Mechase gewen Eretz Mitzrayim, which covered the entire Eretz Mitzrayim. Okay, so it would seem like that according to the first shot, Aaron did not complete the mitzvah, and according to the second shot, he did. But the truth is, that's not the pshat here. Even according to the first pshat, Aaron did complete the mitzvah in a different way. Depends how you look at it. Because over here, this is a kind of a mitzvah that has different aspects to it, and therefore it's not so clear what is considered to be the completion of the mitzvah. So here, there's the way we look at this mitzvah according to pshat, and there's the way we look at this mitzvah that he has of tzvardeya, to bring the tzvardeya Mitzrayim according to the medrash. And the Rabbi explains two different points here. First, the Rabbi says, Varum, the Tzfardim zenen gewen. If we look at what this Makkah of Tzfardeya was, so there's 2 points here. Number one, Aleph bepashtus. Very simply, what's the Tzfardeya? Makkah v'niguf l'Mitzrayim. Right now, this is to hit or to plague the Mitzrayim. The far bepshutai hot arein upgetan alles. In the simple pshat, in the second pshat, Rashi is explaining that if you want to say that Aaron completed the Makkah, the only way to explain how he completed the full plaguing of the entire Mitzrayim is to say that when he placed his stick on the Nilos, all the swarms of the Tzfardeya that will cover the entire Mitzrayim came out. So according to the simple pshat, that's the only way how he completes it. But then there's another pointer to the Makkah. It's not just about the plaguing itself. The whole point of the Makkah was that Pare should get the message, and that Pare should learn from this something. So the point is not even the plague itself. So whether Aaron is completing that this plague itself covers the whole Mitzrayim or not, and in this case he didn't. So as far as the actual Makkah itself, he didn't. But the Makkah itself is not even the point, though. The point is what Pari will darshan afterwards, the message Pari will take out afterwards. That that he has to send the Yidden out of Mitzrayim. So we could say that what Aaron did, he accomplished this even according to the Medrash. If you're going to look not at the physical, literal plague that's happening right now, but at what the plague is supposed to accomplish, that's the Medrash aspect of it, what Pare that is will learn from this plague, so that Aaron did accomplish. But as this is given, the Noch, Maken, Oisachulu, what Aaron did was, he brought this massive frog that brought about this unusual event in Mitzrayim, that caused Pare to ask, what's going on over here? What caused Pare to ask what's going on over here? This, that Aaron did. Even though the actual development of the plague itself was not directly through Aaron, but this that brought Pare to ask what's going on over here is attributed all to Aaron. So that's one way how to put it. In andere Werte, or the Rebbe says we could say this also in different words, going back now to the actual command, the way the Eibishter commands Aaron to bring up this Makkah in Mitzrayim. Leuten mefarish dein Teire b'derech ha-medrish hadrash. If you explain Torah expounding and not literal, according to Drash, is das azoi euch beneged dem pirish von dem tzivui v'hal es hatzfardim. So therefore we could understand also the command when it says v'hal es hatzfardim, that you, Aaron, bring up the tzfardim in the plural term. Lav dafka hatzfardim kipshutei rabim. Not necessarily does it mean that the Eibishter actually wants that Aaron should be the one to bring up all the swarms of the tzfardim. Why does it matter if he's going to be the actual one to bring up all the tzfardim or not? It could also mean that Aaron will bring up one Sfardeya and all the swarms will come out afterwards. Because again, according to what the Rebbe says before, if you're learning the pshat of the pasuk, so then Vahalas Atzfardim literally means we're focusing on the actual plague now. Not the message that you're supposed to take from the plague, was focusing on the actual plague. So if the pasuk says Vahalas Atzfardim, it's saying a plural term and we're focusing on the plague itself, so then it means Aaron has to bring up all the swarms of the plague. That's the mitzvah. But if it says Vahalas Atzfardim according to the drash of the pasuk, the drash is that there's a certain point of this makkah that comes afterwards, that Pare is going to darshan, that Pare is going to ask what's going on over here. So mitzad that inyan, lav dafka, Aaron has to bring all the swarms of the Sfardim. Just bringing up this one massive Svardeya is what causes Pare to ask the question of what's going on over here. So therefore we could say that the Sfardim in the pasuk is lav dafka. It doesn't have to be translated kipshuta if you're looking at the point of the makkah that comes afterwards. And now going back to the second point that the Rebbe said before, since what are we speaking about over here? We're speaking about hitting and plaguing the Mitzrayim, similar to what the Rebbe brought before regarding Malchus, is Batzri. So therefore over here, Aaron says, let me refrain, let me do the minimum that's necessary. And therefore he accepted and he said that what the Eibishter means is, as the tziviyot gemeint achas cholu, that the mitzvah is that I'm going to bring up one Sfardeya, is nitadach shash, pen Yosef, and therefore there's no concern that they'll be adding to the plague more than what he has to do. The Eibishter tells him, Tzfardim, it means Tzfardeya achas kipshutoy. So as far as the plague, his involvement in hitting the Mitzrayim is only one Tzfardeya. Whatever results afterwards, the Eibishter does not mean that he should do. So therefore, how could he hit more than what the Eibishter tells him? Again, similar to what we find by Malchus, that you're not allowed to hit more when the Torah says. So when you have two ways how to interpret a pasuk, like by Arbaim, you say you're machmer and you say that it means 39. Over here as well, you have two ways how to interpret what the Eibishter meant. So Aaron said, I'll bring up just one svardeya, the minimum. Rabbi concludes here with the lesson that we could learn from the two ways of what Aaron did to fulfill his mitzvah of bringing the tzvardeya. The Vaeira from the beide pirushim is. So the lesson we can take from both of these interpretations of Rashi. From the ersten Pirish, as Aaron hat aufgebracht nur tzvardeya achas, from the first pshat, that Aaron only did the minimum that he was able to do in this case. And so the rest of the mitzvah, there's a suffix about the rest of it, and he can't do the rest of it. There's a chashash, he might add more than he has to, so he could only do the minimum, and the rest is going to have to happen on its own. From this we learn, as midas purani is makal mitzrayim kach, if this is so, when it comes to a negative, to punishing, that when the Eibusha gives you a mitzvah for punishing, so even though you won't be able to do the full punishment, completely, the whole plague of atachas is not going to be you, but nevertheless you do whatever you can. How much more so when it comes to a mitzvah in the positive, as that we have to forewarn and we have to be careful not to do less than what's demanded of you, even if it's a situation where you think that I can't do it fully, but that doesn't mean that you should refrain of doing it completely. Pen yigra, you can't do less than what's demanded of you and what you could do. Und von zweiten Pirish, from the second pshat of Rashi, what did we learn out? From Velaches Kumtois, as Aaron had goyim given the mitzvah. According to the second pshat, it comes out that Aaron completed the mitzvah, and even in the literal sense, Aaron, there was no sfeikis about this. According to the simple pshat, there's no sfeikis. V'ha'al es hatzfardim means that you should bring up all the tzfardim, so therefore it means all. So we're going to say that he brought up all. So over here you have the lesson as medaf sich mishtadel sein zu tana mitzvah b'shleimusa mitchilasa ve'atzayfa ugmara. One should make an effort to fulfill a mitzvah completely. You start it, finish it all the way to the end. Und wenn es handelt sich, if we're dealing with ledugma, for example, in der mitzvah zum mekarev sein at zweiten yidin zu teire und mitzvahs v'talmud teire keneged kulam. If we're dealing with being mekarev another yid to teire mitzvahs, and being mekarev him to learning teire is more important than everything else, as the Rebbe pointed out before, finishing off regarding learning, giving him the full understanding is even more important regarding learning. Don't be satisfied with this, that you take a yid to the first step of bringing him closer to mitzvahs. Number dav gaim zayin business off. Complete it. Take it till the very end. Talk to him, deal with him, and elevate him. Biz as al zayin k'shulchan ha'arach, until he should come to the point that he should fulfill what it says in Shulchan Aruch. Tachlis ili. Bring him to the highest level. That's what we learn from the second pshat of Rashi. But now returning from the point to the point that we see from the first pshat of Rashi, oib aber is an amatziv was a kenod oneib in the mitzvah. If, however, he is in a situation that he could only begin the mitzvah, evet no kena machen de aschale in dem kirva zulas atayra mitzvahs. If he's in a situation that you only have the opportunity to begin the bringing this yid closer to Torah and mitzvahs, right? So, for example, you see a yid on the street and you're able to put him on tefillin one time and you don't know when else you'll meet him or what else you'll ever able to tell him. So you may think to yourself, was is the peula as a and what's the point of beginning of getting involved with this person? You won't know what the final accomplishment here will be. Wer weiß was, es wird sich endigen später. Who knows what will come out from this later? Where it'll end up? Of them kommt der Hira Amura, and therefore for this we have the lesson mentioned before as a mitzvah she'efshel l'kaima akemena. Whatever could be done, you have to do. Over here, Aaron, according to the pshat of the Pashto pshat, actually, according to the Medrash's pshat. So Aaron had this doubt, this suffix. Could I complete this mitzvah? For the point of the medrasha of the mitzvah, could I complete it? Could I not? And therefore he had to minimize and only do the one svardeya. But so he did whatever he was able to. Ubechlal, and in general, even more so, more general point here. But daf sich nit arayin lazen cheshbainis. One does not have to get involved into these kinds of calculations. Bahadi kafshid rachman alam alach. Why would you have to start thinking about Hashem's hidden matters, that what will happen with this yid later? Das ist nicht sein Esek. This is not your job, this is your occupation to think about these things. Darf aneben und tan. You have to begin the steps in the process and do whatever you can. Wieviel nur can, whatever it's possible. If zu mekarev sein a zweiten Yidden, to be mekarev another Yid. Und noch mehr, and even more, b'shas, tut kolatoli boy. If you will do whatever is possible for you, is machshave tove HaKadosh Baruch Hu, mitzar folamaisa. The Eibishter himself will come and combine this and bring this, that it should be fully materialized in action. The Eibishter is mitzaref and bringt that up, sein machshave tove lidei maisa. The Eibishter himself will take that beginning, the first step, the good thought, and even the first step that you did, and will then materialize it, that it should be fully fulfilled, that it should be fully like Shulchan Aruch demands. Und b'shas der Eibishter is going with the mitzvah. When it's the Eibishter that completes the mitzvah for you, wird es abgetan, on keinem didis v'agbalas, the Eibishter completes it without any restrictions and without any limitations, biz and tachlis ilui v'ashlemus, till the ultimate and the greatest level of bringing a yid closer to Hashem.